right. So, now Schneider is well known, I think, to our audience, certainly, as a company that's thought a lot about efficiency, about more thoughtful use of resources. You advise a lot of companies around the world. Among other things, that's one of the areas that you have expertise in. And you're deep into the AI story as well. And I know this, I've had the opportunity to visit, for example, in northern Italy, one of your facilities where you're doing the cooling technologies that will help make data centers and working with NVIDIA on the next generation of chips to spare resources in terms of water in that example. But when we talk about AI and its footprint, tell us where you're coming at this topic. What do you think is the right way to frame the question? Because I see people come in and like the three blind men and the elephant, someone's holding the tail, someone's holding the trunk, and people have very different questions that they're trying to answer when it comes to talking about AI and the green dilemma. How do you frame the question?
I think it is a dilemma because AI has fantastic opportunity, fantastic potential. Some of those examples you referenced from Schneider, we've seen the application of AI in facilities reduce carbon emissions from those facilities by 60%, just by relatively simple implementation. However, the flip side of that is that the application of AI is really driving data center expansion. AI as a technology is a much, much higher power consumer than traditional data centers multiple times. So you're driving carbon emissions quickly, and because of the heat generated by these super powerful chips, they need to be water cooled, whereas data centers historically typically were air cooled. So you have this real sort of dilemma. So in terms of how you look at that and what the question is to ask, I think you could do a sort of return on investment type question. Is it worth it? I don't think that's the right question because I think AI is here. It is inevitable. It will power our lives. It will change our societies. So it's really about, how do we use it responsibly and how do we make sure that we get the most out of it and balance the two sides of that equation?
So, as you say, I'm glad you talked about it as two sides of the equation because there are questions related to sustainability and how we make the AI and then, of course, in how we use the AI. And I think it's important we tend to focus a lot on the first part of it, and rightly so, how the energy needs are growing, although they need to be kept in perspective. Just looking at the headlines, one might think all the world's energy is being consumed by AI. Actually, it's not. According to the International Energy Agency, maybe 1.5% of the world's electricity is consumed in data centers, of which AI is only a part. Now, it happens to be the fastest growing part. We can see the tail is wagging the dog. And in particular locations like Ireland, where I was, in fact, more recently, a few days ago, I was in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is the internet traffic capital of the world. And there are obviously more energy consumption in specific clusters and hubs where there's been something of a backlash. One has to ask the question, what is the footprint in that area? But more generally, we're really seeing loads of electricity growing because of air conditioning needs in the developing world, and rightly so. It's a warming world. Economic growth, electrification of transportation, for example, according to the IEA, these are much bigger drivers of electricity consumption than AI is or will be around the world. But in the places where it's clustered, there are certainly localized effects. It's worth asking this hard question. The second half of this is how we use the AI, and we'll have some sessions ongoing in the next 2 days where we'll talk about the applications in sustainability and what are the ways to enhance those in a positive light. But on this green dilemma, when we talk about where the attention is now, that is the manufacture of AI, if I can call it that, what is the role, you think, for reporting, for regulations, for mandates, as opposed to sort of good intentions and promises from benevolent AI producers? Where should we fall on this spectrum? This is a bit of a transatlantic spectrum as well, because Europe has a very different perspective on this than the US. But I wonder where you come out.
Again, it's the two sides of the equation. If we look at reporting, as you reference, we've seen both the external environment and the internal environment complexify in recent years. Organizations, as you were talking about on the previous panel, dealing a lot of complex data flows, particularly now in their supply chains, having to encompass life cycle assessment, product carbon footprint data into their reporting. Equally, you have a changing landscape of outputs and reporting, new legislations, increasingly complex and granular legislations that change or are paused. So there's a huge complexity there. AI has the ability to help the reporting teams to address that complexity without necessarily adding resource to their teams. So I think there's a very sort of big and strong opportunity there. But it does need to be used responsibly, and you need to be able to do that in a way that generates good outputs without necessarily falling into some of the pitfalls of AI, which can be around, made up data and inability to audit.
Hold off on the pitfalls for the moment. Tell me about the opportunity. What I heard you saying was that AI can help in dealing with the regulations. Am I right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's as you know, certainly in continental Europe, there's a thicket of regulations. The Draghi report talked a lot about how and why this is ensnaring European companies into lack of competitiveness. But there are also places like California with SB 253, and of course you have the UK has its own standards, CSRD in Europe. In this world of that kind of regulatory complexity that's only growing, one after the other, it is tempting to say, hey, throw some AI at it. ChatGPT can get that form done. It's not quite that easy, is it?
No.
So, what is the right way to use and harness AI in a corporate context to simplify and maybe make more efficient this process? And don't you need to sync up with how the regulator themselves is using that AI, whether it's acceptable to them? Give us a snapshot from the frontier of where we are on this.
We always recommend that AI is a tool, but it's a tool as part of a organizational system that has human intervention in it. So one of the critical elements of all reporting is the data inflows, and AI can help you to make those smoother. It can help chase people for data. It can analyze data to look for gaps and anomalies and that kind of thing. But there is a danger that AI will then fill in those gaps and make things up. So you need a bit of human interaction to make sure that's not happening and to put some guardrails in place. Equally, you can then use that data that you've captured from your data lake to export to CSRD or California or whatever it may be. But again, you need some human interaction to ensure that it's both accurate and real and is telling the story that is what your organization is doing.
But the human in the loop, as they say.
So humans in the loop. So AI has the ability to relieve the workload of reporting teams and allow them to be much more efficient. And having been in this world for many years, the biggest complaint I hear from professionals like this is they didn't join up to spend 6 months of their year chasing data and writing reports. They want to have impact. AI helps to maybe reduce that from 6 months to 4 months.
Right.
But it needs guardrails and it needs some care.
Yeah. So I want to see if I can get some questions here for Stuart, but I wanted to share one anecdote, which I am not advocating, but it's one I ran across. One of the areas of greatest complexity is applying for a new nuclear plant license. If you can imagine how complicated that world is. And rightly so, some would say, this is about as existential a threat as you can get if you get it wrong. But I had the occasion within the last year to meet a company of basically of cowboys, I would call them, who applied for nuclear at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in America licenses, and in astonishing speed, they're able to get their application accepted as legitimate and to be considered. And the inside story there, and I won't reveal the company, it normally takes an army of lawyers and regulatory experts and multiple years and millions of dollars to get these applications together. They're very complicated and back and forth, oftentimes questioning. Regulators rightly challenge you. They got this done and accepted as a legitimate application with just a few questions in response in a matter of months. And turns out they had 2 junior guys and ChatGPT. And this is how they did it. They knocked it together and did a good enough job, a credible enough job to get their foot in the door, to be taken seriously by the regulator and to engage in the conversation. I'm not advocating that anyone else should do this, least of all with something as important as nuclear power. But this is how some cowboys will do this.
Yeah.
And in some cases, maybe we should be much more efficient. And now in the U.S. at least, the actual Nuclear Regulatory Commission itself has a mandate from the administration to apply AI to officiate its own processes. Now, one hopes they don't go too far, that they don't throw out the baby with the bathwater on safety issues. But there's certainly scope for the regulators themselves to improve their processes. Surely.
Knowledge is now free, and accessing that knowledge and applying that knowledge is now free. So the question is, what do you do with it? What is the purpose? What are the questions that you ask? So regulation should move more to that sort of purpose-led conversation rather than just the pure application of knowledge, because we can all access the entire sum of human knowledge through ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or whichever you're using.
Agreed. Any questions for Stuart? Let me also use your Slido as well. Show me that it works. I appreciate real life questions, but we also have technology for those of you who might be shy. I do have one closing question for you, Stuart. And then you've talked about collaborative intelligence. What do you mean by this? Is it about that human in the loop concept we talked about, or is it about collaborating among companies? What is it you're getting at with that concept?
Yeah, it particularly works when you look at something like a university campus, a business park, where you'll have a number of collaborators. You've got the systems engineers, you may have academics, you may have research scientists, power providers. If you install a microgrid, you AI enable that and allow the various operators to interact with it, to ask questions, to get data. The AI that you apply in that situation can learn from all of those individual inputs and be a collaborator along with those teams. We did a project in a campus in France, and we saw a 30% increase in the adoption of renewable energy and a similar sort of drop in energy efficiency, just because you were including all of the stakeholders collaborating through the microgrid and the AI tools that help run that grid and optimize the inputs and the outputs from the grid.
The EU AI Act, I think, is now in force, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yeah.
And regulators here, at least in the European Union, I should say there, are moving towards insisting on transparency on how AI systems work. To take my cowboy example from America, if companies in Europe were to do this, that is to use AI for their submissions, can regulators either reject it, or can they demand to know how your model works? What is the law state from what you see? How would auditing work? What is the responsibility of the auditor for that company?
I think that's.
Do we know?
Not yet, I would say, is the honest answer. I think a lot of the standards are beginning to align. Some of the standards, CSRD sort of infers transparency around the use of AI and the impact, but I don't think we're there yet. Audit is a real challenge. A lot of systems, if you're not careful, can be a black box. Put data in, the AI manipulates, spreads the data, reports out. But an enabled AI system will make judgments, and it will fill in gaps, and it will change calculations. So to truly audit that, you need an audit trail of all of those decisions and the inputs and the outputs so that you can match them end to end. But ultimately, auditors will be auditing using AI as well. So you'll end up with two bots talking to each other.
Yeah.
And shaking hands and slipping a few Bitcoin, and it'll all be very nice and comfy. Yeah.
Well, AI may be auditing AI and signing off on AI reports, but we'll all be still meeting in person to talk about it. I assure you that. Thank you for coming, giving us such good insights. Give a round of applause. Thank you.